Scorched by desert heat and mirages, he survived Trial 1. Chief warned, "No one survives 2. The desert did not forgive. It watched, it remembered, and it stripped every trespasser until nothing remained but dust and echoes." Jonah Rooke crawled across the fractured dunes of Helion Expanse, his skin split raw from the relentless sunfire, lips cracked and weeping blood. He should have collapsed hours ago, his body a hollow shell of the man he'd once been. Yet some faint ember, perhaps stubborn will, perhaps a forgotten promise, kept pushing him forward. One hand sank into the scorching grit, the other dragged his ruined frame like a soldier refusing surrender. The horizon warped and swam in the heat haze, bending the air into shimmering columns of liquid silver. Jonah blinked through the blur, his gray eyes dulled by exhaustion and the gnawing void in his mind. Memories flickered at the edges, a life before the sand, before the thirst clawed at his throat like a living thing. But they slipped away, as elusive as water. Then, through the mirage, an outline sharpened, not born of delusion, but real. A cage hovered above the dunes, suspended by invisible chains that defied the wind. The metal gleamed black, like cooled obsidian forged in some ancient forge, radiating waves of heat that warped the air around it. Inside she waited. The figure was curled tight, motionless at first, a shadow against the bars. As Jonah stumbled closer, staggering on legs that felt like lead, she stirred. Her skin held a deep cerulean hue, smooth yet etched with faint veins pulsing beneath the surface like hidden rivers. Eyes of gold, slit vertically like a predator's, flicked open and fixed on him with unblinking intensity. Mina Veed. The name echoed in his fractured thoughts, unbidden, as if the desert itself had whispered it. Her hands were bound by cuffs of argent steel, sharp-edged and etched with glowing sigils that pulsed like dying stars. Jonah collapsed against the cage's side, his back sizzling where flesh met metal. Pain lanced through him, a white-hot brand, but he stayed, letting his body form a meager shield against the direct blaze. The air seared his lungs with every ragged inhale, turning breath to fire. He forced out a rasp, voice cracked like dry earth. "You, alive!" Her gaze pierced him, measuring the remnants of his soul in that endless stare, cold and burning all at once, as if she could peel back his skin and see the marrow of his bones. No words came, only those eyes holding secrets older than the dunes. Jonah looked away first, swallowing against the sawdust scrape of his throat, the thirst a constant scream in his veins. The desert fell utterly still. Even the wind had died, leaving a hush that pressed like a weight. Then footsteps, a deliberate rhythm, sand shifting under disciplined boots. Jonah's head snapped up, muscles protesting with fresh agony. Shapes materialized through the shimmer. Sand wardens, tall figures, draped in segmented armor, like layered shale from some forgotten quarry. Their faces were sealed behind smooth, featureless masks, reflecting the sun in blind glints. They moved in eerie synchrony, forming a tightening ring around the cage, spears humming with faint energy. At their center strode the Archon Malrek. His frame was cloaked in bones, long, pale fragments bound into a rattling mantle that whispered of ancient rites. A staff capped with a sickly green crystal gleamed at his side, its light casting elongated shadows. His mask was a slab of unyielding black, carved with thin, symmetrical lines that evoked forgotten geometries. He halted before Jonah in the cage, driving the staff once into the ground. The impact reverberated like distant thunder across the empty expanse. His voice emerged low and deliberate, laced with the weight of ritual. "You endured Trial 1. Few mortals walk this far." Jonah hauled himself upright, every nerve alight with fire. "Trial? What?" Malrek tilted his head, the masked lines seeming to deepen in mocking amusement. as if Jonah's ignorance was a scripted jest. No one survives trial two. Two wardens surged forward without a sound, seizing Jonah's arms in grips like iron vices. He thrashed once, a futile spark of defiance, then sagged, conserving what little strength remained. They dragged him across the blistering grit, toward a circle of black stone pillars that rose from the desert floor like the teeth of some buried beast. Etched spirals glowed faintly blue along their surfaces, humming with latent power. The Axiom Ring. Jonah was flung to his knees at its heart, the sand biting into his skin. The cage descended soundlessly, chains whispering as it settled. A click echoed like a blade drawn from its sheath, and the doors unlocked. Mina stepped out, the cuffs vanishing as if dissolved by the air itself. The wardens froze in perfect stillness. The desert held its breath, the heat thickening into something almost tangible. Jonah's chest heaved, dust choking his words. "Run, now!" She did not. Her body uncoiled with a predator's grace, fury igniting in those golden eyes. In a blur, she lunged at the Archon, fists cutting the air like weapons honed by survival. Arrows hissed from the warden's bows, two buried deep in her torso with wet thuds, another grazing her shoulder in a spray of cerulean blood. She stumbled, momentum faltering, but pressed on. Her strike connected, fist cracking against the Archon's mask with bone-jarring force. The black shell fractured, shards glinting as they fell. Beneath lay not an alien visage, but human, aged, scarred, eyes hollowed by endless cycles. Jonah's own face stared back, twisted by time and torment, a shard of crystal embedded in the brow, like a parasitic crown, pulsing with stolen light. Recognition hit Jonah like a gut punch, stealing his breath. "No, that's me!" The circle trembled, a low rumble building from the earth. The wardens dissolved into swirling clouds of grit, sucked back into the dunes as if the desert reclaimed its own. The ritual unraveled, pillars sinking into sand with groaning finality. Mina crumpled, arrows protruding like cruel spines, her blood warm and slick. Jonah surged forward on instinct, catching her before she hit the ground. Her weight sagged against him, heavy with shared desperation, soaking his chest in cerulean warmth. He staggered, muscles screaming in protest, then bolted from the collapsing ring. The desert howled in pursuit, a storm of sand rising behind them, pillars vanishing into the abyss. He ran blind, feet tearing on shards of salt and stone, the world narrowing to the rhythm of his pulse and her shallow breaths. Night fell swiftly, the sky bruising with violet fire, stars piercing like distant accusations. Only when the sand dipped into a hollow did Jonah stumble to a halt, lungs burning. Before them shimmered a pool of water, clear as fractured glass under the starlight, its surface unnaturally still. The air vibrated, a voice echoing from nowhere and everywhere. Not human, but woven into the desert's pulse. One drink restores the bearer. One wash saves another. Choose. Jonah's body quaked, throat raw with unquenchable thirst. The water called to him, a siren's promise of life, cool relief flooding his parched cells. He crawled forward, hands trembling above the pool, his reflection staring back, gaunt, desperate, torn between self and sacrifice. The bond of survival tugged at him, unfamiliar yet insistent. In her eyes earlier, he'd seen a mirror of his own isolation. But Mina stirred, even teetering on death's edge. Her hands seized an arrow shaft, yanking it free with a gasp that echoed through him. She grabbed his wrist, dragging the sharpened tip across his palm in a swift, deliberate cut. Blood welled, crimson mixing with her cerulean in the water, turning it to molten silver. She pressed the glowing elixir to her wounds, light bursting outward in a cascade that wove through both their bodies, threading flesh and breath into an unbreakable tapestry. Jonah gasped as pain bifurcated, his thirst now hers. her agony his, like molten glass flooding shared veins. He felt her fire, resilient and ancient, bolstering his fading resolve. Her lips brushed his ear, whisper fierce yet fragile amid the storm's distant roar. Now you are not alone. The desert winds howled anew, carrying the weight of unfinished trials. Jonah knew deep in the fused rhythm of their hearts that the true ordeal had only ignited. Night clamped down, cold and heavy, the pool's silver glow fading to a dim coin. Jonah felt Mina's pulse in his own, her pain a sharp echo in his ribs, his thirst a fire in her throat. The bond held them together, a cool thread against the desert's burn. He eased her against a wind-carved ridge, her cerulean skin stark against pale sand. Her breasts were ragged, gold eyes catching starlight. Jonah tore cloth from his sleeve, packing her arrow wounds, snapping one shaft, but keeping the head. "Hold on," he rasped. Her gaze held steady, a silent vow. Sand ticked, too precise for wind. Jonah crouched, scanning the hollow's rim, senses sharp. A gully snaked east, its walls glassy with old heat, ozone sharp in the air. He signed, "East." Mina nodded, pushing up, leaning on the stone. They moved, Jonah leading, stepping on dense sand to avoid collapse. He tracked a star above the sky's north shoulder, correcting drift. The wind pulsed. 4 beats, pause, 4 again, like a living rhythm. Mina's hand grazed his wrist, the bond whispering a warning. A dune slumped, birthing a sand warden, armor glinting, mask blank. Its spear crackled, triple-bladed head pulsing green. Jonah planted his feet, Mina behind him, her wounds slowing but healing. He gripped the broken arrowhead, sharp but meager. The warden lunged on the wind's 5th beat. Jonah pivoted, letting the spear graze past, driving the arrowhead into its arm joint. The armor locked. Mina's heel smashed its knee, collapsing it into dust, mask flashing blue. Jonah seized its spear, its weight solid, balanced. 3 more wardens rose, advancing in a half arc. Jonah positioned Mina behind his blade line, leaving her room to strike. He feinted high, cut low, tearing plates. Mina hammered chest vents, sand bursting. The second swung a hammer. Jonah slid right, jamming its haft with his spear. Mina struck its neck seam. The third kick hitting Jonah's thigh. Pain flared through the bond. Mina hissed but held firm. He cracked its mask with the spear's butt, exposing pulsing circuitry, not flesh, but memory. The wind stopped, silence heavy. Dunes swallowed the wardens, masks last. Jonah's breath steadied. Mina touched the spear's crystals. "They read you now," she said, voice strained. "Keep it." He nodded, checking the horizon, clear. They moved east, the gully widening to black stones, carved with jagged waves. Mina brushed one, flinching, the bond sparking. "Archive nodes," she said. "Helion stores steps, choices, enforces obedience." Jonah's spine chilled. Malric's face, his own, flashing in his mind. He shoved it down, focusing on survival. Ground, water, answers. He avoided the nodes, guiding Mina to a shadowed cleft to rest. He stood guard, prying a prism from the spear, its light curling into a map of stone circles. Mina watched, approving. "You see patterns. That saves lives." "Patterns kept me breathing," Jonah said. "Names, too. I'm Jonah Rooke. Yours?" "Mina Veed. Azura spawns, right bait." Her eyes met his, sealing a pact. He bound the spear to his forearm, testing its swing. Dawn neared, the sky ash blue, wind carrying salt and metal. A hum vibrated, deep and old. Mesas rose, grooved with claw-like scars, their bases littered with curled, dark plates. Mina lifted one, etched with spirals. Old signal catchers, dead centuries. Jonah cut strips, reinforcing their boots. He touched a mesa seam. It parted, spilling cold air. The bond rippled with Mina's relief. Inside, glowing walls pulsed like veins. The floor dustless. Jonah kept the spear low, stepping heel to toe, the hum syncing with his pulse, a warning of the desert's next trap. The passage through the mesa opened into a chamber where the air hung heavy, laced with salt and the faint hum of something alive. Jonah moved cautiously, spear low, senses sharpened by the bond that pulsed between him and Mina. The walls gleamed with veins of mineral light, weaving patterns like circuits carved by an ancient hand. The floor was smooth, unmarred by dust or footprints, as if time refused to linger here. Above, the ceiling arched in a perfect curve, studded with crystals that drifted in slow rotation, casting motes of silver across the stone. Mina walked at his side, her curved blade, salvaged from the gully fight, glowing faintly in her grip. Her wounds had closed further, the bond's silver light knitting her flesh, but her steps were measured, conserving strength. Jonah felt her fatigue in his own muscles, a shared weight that grounded him. He counted exits, 2 narrow arcs at the chamber's edges, and marked the pillar at its center. Clear as glass, it pulsed with motes of light swirling like a contained storm. 3 metal rings hovered around it, rotating in opposing planes, their surfaces etched with the same stacked wave script he'd seen on the archive nodes. Mina's gaze flicked to the pillar, her gold eyes narrowing. Protocol. Well, she said, voice low, steady. No water here, only echoes. It shows what Helion wants you to see. Jonah's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, spear angled defensively. The mote shifted, coalescing into a figure within the pillar. A man, broad-shouldered, head bowed. As Jonah approached, the face lifted and his breath caught. It was him, older weathered eyes like stone under ice. A crystal shard embedded in his brow, pulsing with sickly green light. The Archon, Malrek. His own future, twisted by the desert's will. A voice rose, not from the figure but from the chamber itself, woven into the walls and air. Trial 2 begins when you believe you can choose. It ends when Helion chooses you. Jonah's grip on the spear tightened, knuckles whitening. Define ends, he growled, voice rough with defiance. The rings spun faster, heat building in the air. The pillar clouded, then cleared, revealing fractured images, moments of a life not yet lived. A city under glass domes, shimmering in a crimson haze. A squad in gray armor, faces blurred but familiar, marching in lockstep. A boy with gray eyes laughed once, then never again, his joy swallowed by the sand. Jonah's chest tightened, the bond jolting as Mina steadied him with a hand on his back, her touch a cool anchor against the flood of visions. Your path loops, the voice intoned. You circle back. You become the hand that sets the test. You enforce the recall. You will be Malrek. Mina stepped forward, shoulders squared, her blade catching the pillar's light. Show the third path, she demanded, voice cutting through the hum like a blade. The motes dimmed, the rings slowing. The voice thinned to a whisper. There is no third path. Her eyes flicked to Jonah, mouth set in a hard line. There is always a third path. Wardens poured from the chamber's side arcs, 6 at once, moving like blades loosed from sheaths. Their armor gleamed, masks blank, polearms crackling with green energy. Jonah shifted, back to Mina, spear raised. He counted angles, 2 flankers, 2 center drivers, 2 holding back with charged weapons. His mind snapped to old drills. Never let them box you in. He struck first, spear flicking out, catching the lead warden at the neck seam. The armor buckled, sand jetting from the breach. Mina slid under his arm, her blade slicing a precise arc through a chest plate, dust exploding outward. The third warden thrust toward her, pole arm humming. Jonah lunged, deflecting the blow with his spear's shaft, the impact jarring his bones. The bond flared, Mina's pain echoing in his ribs. The rear wardens leveled their weapons, crystals pulsing in sequence. A net of green light flared between them, sweeping forward like a tide. Jonah grabbed Mina, rolling them both aside as the net seared the stone where they'd stood, leaving a scorched tang of silica. He hurled the broken arrowhead from his belt, aiming for a crystal node on one pole arm. It struck, lodging deep, and the node shorted, collapsing a quadrant of the net. Mina saw the gap and sprang through, crashing into the flanker. Her blade severed the weapon's crystal strip, and the warden imploded into a cone of dust. The pillar pulsed brighter, the voice hardening. Choose release, drink, forget. Jonah snarled, ripping 2 prisms from his spear's head. He slammed them into the floor, kicking a fallen warden mask onto them. The prisms lit, silver threads racing to the pillar, mimicking the map he'd seen in the gully. The chamber had circuits, and he just closed one with defiance and debris. The ring stuttered, the wardens freezing for a single breath, a soldier's gold in battle. Mina seized the moment, pressing their cut palms together, blood smearing against the pillar. The motes swarmed to the contact, the glow shifting from green to silver. The voice warped, a glitch in its cadence. Unauthorized vector. Jonah leaned into the pillar, shoving back against the pull on his thoughts. He fell into old training, blank walls, short breaths, and counting steps to block out intrusion. The pillar cracked, a hairline fracture leaking light. The wardens lurched, their synchrony faltering, masks flickering with something like fear. Mina's whisper was steel. Third path. The pillar shattered, light flooding the chamber in a silver wave. The rings fell like broken wings, clattering to the stone. The wardens scattered into loose sand, mass dissolving last. Jonah shielded Mina until the flare passed, the bond singing like a taut wire. When the light cleared, a single strand of silver drifted from the broken pillar, sinking into their joined hands, fusing deeper into their shared pulse. Now it knows us, Mina said, breathing hard, standing tall. Now it must account for us. Jonah nodded, feeling the desert shift beyond the chamber, something ancient stirring in protest. He gathered the fallen mask and spare prisms, wary of their value. Pointing to a narrow exit carved in the far wall, he said, "We move." They stepped into the cold dawn, the air clean for a fleeting moment before the wind rose again. Drums echoed from the east, steady, unyielding, rolling from a rise of blue stone that burned like ice under the rising sun. Mina's chin lifted, her eyes glinting, not with joy but recognition. "Azura signals," she said. "A hold if it still stands." Jonah checked the spear's tie on his forearm, its weight a reassurance. He scanned the dunes stretching toward the blue rise, their edges sharp with threat. The bond pulsed steadily, a compass of shared resolve. He met Mina's gaze, her blade gleaming in the faint light. "Then we make it stand." They ran the desert, watching every step. The drums grew louder, calling them forward, but the sand whispered of trials yet to come. Jonah's boots crunched, the makeshift plates holding firm. Mina matched his pace, her wounds no longer bleeding, but her strength drawn from the bond. The horizon shimmered, the blue rise growing closer, its walls scarred with the marks of past assaults. As they crested a dune, shapes circled overhead, not birds but constructs of black bone and glowing membranes, their glass eyes rotating lidlessly. "Echo scouts," Mina warned, her voice tight. "They mark us for Helion." Jonah gripped his spear, tracking their spiral. "Then we don't let them." He readied for the next fight, the bond humming with shared defiance, the desert's memory coiling tighter around them. The drums of Azura Hold pulsed like a heartbeat, rolling across the dunes as Jonah and Mina approached the bluestone rise. The walls loomed taller than the sand, their surfaces carved with channels that glowed faint silver, like veins of a living fortress. Scars marred the stone, cracks sealed with resin, scorch marks black as coal, testaments to battles fought and endured. Jonah's boots crunched on the fractured plain, the makeshift plates holding firm. Mina moved beside him, her curved blade steady, her steps deliberate despite the bond's shared fatigue weighing on them both. The desert's heat pressed down, relentless, but the bond thrummed with a shared fire that kept them moving. The gates were sealed, a slab of blue stone unyielding under the sun's glare. Jonah touched the wall, feeling a faint vibration, as if the hold itself breathed. Mina pressed her palm to a groove, her cerulean skin glowing briefly where it met the stone. The wall shuddered, a narrow slit parting with a groan. Voices echoed from within, low and deliberate, their cadence cautious. Jonah raised his spear, muscles tensing, but Mina's hand caught his arm. They guard with suspicion. Let me. She stepped through the slit first, blade lowered but ready. Jonah followed, senses sharp, counting steps into the unknown. The air inside was cool, heavy with incense and the tang of salt. The hold opened into a hollow citadel, its interior a maze of stalagmite-like towers rising from the stone floor, linked by bridges of woven metallic threads. Pools of silver water glowed faintly in the twilight, their surfaces rippling without cause. Figures approached, tall, their skin shades of blue cloaked in the shimmering silver. Their eyes gleamed like lanterns, steady and unblinking. At their heads stood one robed in deeper hues, silver marks curling down their cheeks like written scars. The leader raised a hand. Mina Veed returned, and not alone. Mina inclined her head, a gesture of respect without submission. Archivist, the desert tore the path, but we stand. The archivist's gaze shifted to Jonah, piercing yet calm. A mortal tethered to you. Why? Jonah met their eyes, unflinching. She chose it. I didn't argue. The archivist studied him, then spoke, voice steady as carved stone. The bond shifts trial too. It was not meant. Helion will resist. Already it remakes your shadow. Jonah's grip tightened on the spear. The memory of Malrek's face, his own, aged and broken, burning in his mind. I saw him, Archon Malrek, my face. A murmur rippled through the cloaked figures, their silver marks flickering. The archivist's eyes narrowed, the weight of their words heavy. So the cycle repeats. Helion molds survivors into wardens. Each bearer is broken until only obedience remains. Jonah's jaw locked, his voice low. Then I break the cycle. The archivists tilted their head, a faint curve to their lips, neither mocking nor approving. Words every bearer speaks. Few hold. Mina's voice cut through, sharp and unyielding. He held. At the pool, he gave blood when thirst could have killed him. He struck the pillar rather than yield. He's not like the rest. The archivist's gaze lingered on them both, silver marks glowing faintly. After a long pause, they gestured deeper into the hold. Then let us see if resolve endures. The desert listens, and so must we. They followed, footsteps echoing against the polished stone. Jonah counted turns, mapping the corridors in his mind. A soldier's habit, never blind in new terrain. The passages wound like arteries, lit by blue fire lamps that burned without smoke. The archivist led them to a chamber where silver light poured from above, illuminating a shallow basin of water at its center. Its surface rippled, though no wind stirred, reflecting fragments of their faces, Jonah's gray eyes, Mina's golden slits. The archivist gestured to the basin. The memory well, it shows truths Helion buries. Step forward. Mina knelt at the rim, her reflection fracturing in the water. Jonah hesitated, scanning the Azura figures, watching from the shadows, their gazes heavy with judgment. He crouched beside her, spear resting across his knees, the bond humming with shared tension. The water stirred, shapes forming, visions pulled from a place between memory and prophecy. Dunes collapsed into towering giants of sand. Jonah saw himself in armor of bone, a crystal crown burned into his skull, commanding wardens with a voice not his own. His breath hitched, the bond spiking with a shared ache. That's not me, he growled, voice rough with defiance. The archivist's tone was cool, unyielding. Yet it is. A path Helion favors. You are clay in its hands, pressed until you take its shape. Jonah's fist clenched, the spear shaft biting into his palm. Then the clay fights back. The water shifted, showing Mina bound in chains of light, her eyes dim, her fire fading. Jonah reached instinctively, the bond flaring with pain that lanced down his arm. Mina gasped, steadying herself, her voice firm. Enough visions. They weaken, not guide. The archivist nodded, a flicker of respect in their eyes. Wise, but you must know what you defy. Helion feeds on choices twisted into obedience. Every bearer believes they hold freedom. Every bearer is crushed when they choose as Helion wills. Jonah stood planting the spear's butt against the stone, its echo sharp. Then tell me how to break it. No riddles. The archivist's silver marks pulsed faintly. To sever the cycle, strike the heart, the axiom core, buried beneath the expanse. It forges wardens, reshapes survivors into archons. But it is guarded, and it recognizes only its own. Jonah's eyes narrowed, the weight of Malrek's face settling in his chest. And since I carry that shadow, I'm the key. Mina touched his arm, her golden eyes fierce. Not alone. The bond twists recognition. Together we breach where one would fall. The archivists study them, unreadable, then spread their hands. So be it. We grant passage, supplies, weapons, and maps of what remains true. No escort. If Helion senses our strength moving, it will erase this hold. Two shadows may slip where an army cannot. Jonah gave a curt nod, soldier logic aligning with their words. The Azura dispersed, leaving only the archivist. They stepped closer, voice low. Beware the mirages. They do not merely trick the eye, they write memory. Trust them, and you lose yourself. The bond is your compass. Jonah met their gaze, his voice steady. I've followed worse. This one fights beside me. Mina's lips curved in a faint, fierce smile, her blade catching the silver light. The archivist gestured them away. Go! Before dawn marks you as targets. They exited through a narrow tunnel, emerging onto a plain of fractured stone. Jonah carried a satchel of compressed rations, bitter but sustaining. Mina bore a second Azura blade, its edge lighter and sharper than the first. The sun bled red across the horizon, casting long shadows. Jonah checked the map, a crystal shard etched with glowing threads, marking a path through the whisper dunes to the core. The name sent a chill through him, the bond echoing Mina's unease. By midday, the whispers began. Boots crunched beside him, a familiar cadence from a lifelong buried. Jonah turned, heart lurching. His old squad marched at his flank, gray uniforms faded, faces blurred, but voices sharp. Rook, fall in. You're late. The bond flared, pain shooting through his chest as Mina snapped her fingers in front of his face, jerking him free. The squad dissolved into grit, the whispers fading. Helion Tess, Mina warned, her voice low. Don't linger. Jonah grunted, shaking his head clear. Understood. The bond steadied him, her pulse a tether against the desert's lies, but the whispers grew bolder, and the path to the core loomed darker. The whisper dunes stretched before Jonah and Mina, a sea of sand that rippled under a sky bruised with heat. The crystal map glowed faintly in Jonah's hand, its silver threads tracing a path to the axiom core, a black spire pulsing with green veins, rising from a basin ringed by jagged cliffs. The air thrummed with a low, unnatural hum, as if the desert itself anticipated their approach. Jonah lay flat along a ridge, eyes narrowed, studying the wardens below. Their movements were precise, tracing perfect lines around the spire, rotating every 12 counts, shifting sides every 24. Not flesh, but machines cloaked in armor, their masks blank mirrors under the sun. Mina crouched beside him, her golden eyes reflecting the core's sickly glow. She traced a quick sketch in the dust, a crude outline of the spire and its patrols. Cycles, she said, voice low but sharp. Predictable, but tight. We need a fracture. Jonah's gaze locked on the spire's pulsing veins, their rhythm familiar. a signal cadence from his soldier days. 3 long pulses, 1 short. It's a beacon, he muttered. They're slaves to it. Break the pulse, we break their line. Mina's lips twitched, a flicker of approval. Then we cut the heart. They slid down the ridge, bodies low against the slope, leaving no trace. Jonah led, each step calculated to avoid loose sand, his spear strapped tight to his forearm. Mina followed, her twin blades glinting faintly, her movements fluid despite the bond's shared ache. At the basin's edge, they hugged the cliff's shadow, creeping closer. 2 wardens broke from their patrol, crossing their path. Jonah froze, spear angled low, the bond pulsing with Mina's steady breath. The wardens paused, heads turning, their blank masks seeming to burn through stone. Then they moved on, sink unbroken. Reaching a cluster of rocks within striking distance of the spire, Jonah crouched, unpacking a prism from his satchel. He clicked it into his spear's blade, the bond resonating as it glowed silver. Mina's voice was a whisper, urgent. Strike fast. The core will adapt. Jonah nodded, muscles coiling. He sprinted from cover, spear angled like a lance, the bond amplifying his focus. The nearest warden turned too late. He drove the spearhead into the spire's base, sparks screaming as metal met stone. Green light flared into violent white, the pulse stuttering. Wardens collapsed mid-step, armor shuddering into streams of sand. The rest convulsed, formations fracturing like glass. Mina charged past, blades flashing, slicing through a staggered warden's chestplate. Dust erupted, coating her cerulean skin. Jonah spun, his spear carving wide arcs, splitting armor and crystal nodes with each strike. For a moment, chaos reigned in the basin, the bond thrumming with shared adrenaline. But the core's hum deepened, a growl of defiance. The ground cracked open. New wardens rose from the sand, birthed fully armed, their masks featureless save for a single glowing line across the eyes. They moved faster, strikes lethal, no pause in their advance. Jonah caught a blow on his spear shaft, the impact rattling his bones. The bond carried the pain to Mina, who hissed but held her ground, her blades weaving a silver blur to cover his flank. A warden lunged at her, its spear slicing the air. Jonah threw himself between them, taking the strike along his side. Heat seared his ribs, blood welling, the bond screaming as Mina staggered, feeling the wound as her own. "Hold the crack!" Jonah shouted, voice raw. Mina's eyes blaze, gold slits fierce with resolve. She pressed her palm to the spire, silver light pouring from her skin into the stone. The bond surged like lightning, their shared will forcing the pulse to spasm again. More wardens froze, collapsing into dust, but the spire's scream grew, a sound not for ears but for souls, shaking the basin with raw power. Sandstorms whipped up, flaying exposed skin with shards of grit. Jonah rammed his spear deeper into the crack, levering it wider, muscles burning. From the rift, a figure emerged, cloaked in bone, staff blazing with crystal fire. Archon Malrek. No mask now, just Jonah's face, aged, scarred, eyes rimmed with frost, the crystal in his brow pulsing like a parasite. The world narrowed to that face, a mirror of what Helion wanted Jonah to become. "You cannot sever what is chosen," Malrek said, voice low, intimate, as if speaking to himself. "You are me. I am what survives when all else yields." Mina pulled Jonah back, her blade raised, the bond steadying his shaking hands. "He's a lie," she said, voice cutting through the storm. Helion's shadow and flesh. Malrek's gaze sliced to her, then back to Jonah. "She binds you to weakness. Break her, and the desert bends. Fail, and you crawl the cycle until your bones are dust." Jonah's teeth gritted, blood dripping from his side. "I've crawled before. I stood every time." Malrek raised his staff, and the sand rose with it, shaping into wardens by the dozen, an army filling the basin. Their eyes burned green, mirroring the core's glow. Jonah squared his stance, spear tight, Mina's back brushing his, the bond pulsing with shared defiance. "Then we break you first," Ani said. The army advanced, but Jonah's mind snapped to a new angle. Not just combat, but sabotage. He whispered to Mina, "The prisms, they're the core's eyes." She nodded, understanding instantly. They broke left, dodging through a thinner line of wardens, Jonah's spear clearing a path, Mina's blades finishing the stragglers. He ripped a prism from his spear and hurled it at a glowing node on the spire's flank. It struck, embedding deep, and the green pulse flickered, wardens stumbling mid-step. Mina pressed her palm to another node, silver light flaring through the bond. The spire groaned, cracks spiderwebbing upward. Jonah drove his spear into the widening rift, twisting with all his strength. The core's scream peaked, sand swirling into a blinding vortex. Malrek raised his staff, a shield of crystal flaring around him. But the bond's silver light pulsed stronger, fracturing the barrier's edges. Jonah lunged, spear aimed for Malrek's chest. The Archon caught the shaft, his grip crushing, bones creaking in Jonah's hands. Mina leapt, her blades flashing, but Malrek's staff blocked, the clash ringing like a bell across the basin. Wardens paused, as if the outcome would rewrite their existence. Malrek shoved Jonah back, sending him crashing into stone, vision blurring. The bond screamed, Mina stumbling as blood welled on her lips, echoing his pain. Malrek stepped forward, calm, inevitable. "The desert reforges strength. You will be remade." Jonah forced a breath, vision clearing. "Not today." He stabbed low, not at Malrek but at the ground, prisms flaring silver. The stone cracked, energy surging upward, throwing Malrek off balance. Mina seized the moment, her blade slicing into his side. Green light spilled instead of blood, hissing like acid. Malrek roared, striking Mina across the chest. She flew back, hitting hard, the bond slamming Jonah with her pain. "Mina!" he shouted, scrambling to her side. She struggled to rise, breath shallow, but her eyes burned fiercely. "Finish it!" Jonah charged, spear and staff clashing in a shower of sparks. Each blow shook the basin, the bond fueling his strength, Mina's will steadying his aim. They drove Malrek back, step by step, to the core's glowing rift. Light roared below, a pit of raw power. Malrek's voice thundered, "Strike me and you become me!" Jonah locked eyes with his older self, the bond of fire in his veins. "Then I choose my own way." He shoved, spear-piercing Malrek's chest, driving them both into the light. The basin erupted in silver and green fire, the core's scream swallowing all sound. The light consumed everything, a blinding surge of silver and green that pressed against Jonah's bones like a physical weight. He tumbled through it, locked against Malrek, spear jammed against the Archon's blazing staff. The bond with Mina screamed in his veins, silver threads clashing with the core's sickly green pulse, each force vying to rewrite the other. His thoughts frayed, memories of sand and blood blurring into a void where time felt unmoored. Then silence, sharp, absolute, like a blade slicing through chaos. Jonah hit the ground hard, dirt under his palms instead of sand. He rolled to a crouch, spear raised, lungs burning. The basin was gone. The hold, the dunes, the spire, all vanished. He stood in a desert of mirrors, endless panes of glass stretching under a skyless void, each reflecting a fractured version of himself. Young soldier in gray fatigues, broken veteran with hollow eyes, Archon cloaked in bone and crystal. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of metal and ash, the bond pulsing faintly, tethering him to Mina's distant presence. Malrek stepped from one mirror, solid, staff glowing with green fire. His face, Jonah's face, aged and scarred, wore no mask, only a cold certainty. His voice was quieter now, intimate, like a confession to a dying friend. "This is the marrow of trial 2. Choice writes the outcome here. But you already know you are me. Jonah's chest heaved, sweat freezing on his skin. If I were you, I'd bleed like I do. He lunged, spear slicing through the air, but Malrek parried with eerie precision, as if he'd fought this battle 1,000 times. Each clash rang across the mirrors, ripples shattering reflections of Jonah's past selves. The soldier fell first, uniform dissolving into dust. Jonah pressed harder, feinting low, then striking high, but Malrek countered every move, his staff a blur of green light. Fighting himself was like fighting a shadow that knew every step. Mina's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. Jonah! She appeared in a mirror, bleeding but unbowed, her cerulean skin glowing with silver defiance. Her reflection showed no chains, only fire, her strength feeding the bond. She pressed her palms against the glass, silver light spreading like cracks in ice. The bond surged, guiding Jonah's movements, sharpening his focus. He feinted left, Malrek moving to counter as expected. But Jonah broke rhythm, something his older self would never do. He rolled low, slashing across Malrek's thigh. Green light spilled like venom, and the Archon hissed, staggering for the first time. You deviate, Malrek growled, his voice fraying with surprise. Damn right, Jonah spat, rising to his feet. The bond burned brighter, Mina's will a steady pulse in his chest. They clashed again, spear and staff locked in a furious dance, sparks showering across the mirrors. Jonah pushed past exhaustion, each strike fueled by the bond, Mina's strength steadying his trembling arms. But Malrek adapted, his blows heavier, faster, each parry rattling Jonah's bones. The staff struck his shoulder, pain exploding like a grenade. The bond carried it to Mina, who stumbled in her mirror, blood on her lips, but her eyes never wavered. Malrek loomed, staff raised for a killing blow. Helion wins, always. Jonah planted his feet, lowering his spear, not to strike, but to anchor. The bond was more than pain. It was their shared refusal to break. No, he said, voice steady. We win together. Mina screamed, pressing both palms harder against the mirror. Silver light erupted, racing across every pane, shattering reflections one by one. Soldier, wanderer, Archon. Glass exploded into dust, the void trembling. Malrek faltered, surrounded by his breaking selves, his staff flickering as the green light sputtered. Jonah roared, driving his spear through Malrek's chest. The impact cracked the final mirror, the Archon's eyes widening in shock. You broke the script. Jonah leaned close, voice a rasp carved from defiance. I wrote my own. He shoved, and Malrek dissolved into shards of light, bleeding away into the void. The staff crumbled, its crystals dimming to ash. The mirrors collapsed, the desert of glass folding into nothingness. Jonah fell, exhaustion pulling him down like gravity. He woke on sand, the night sky vast and unyielding above. The core's spire was gone, reduced to rubble scattered across the basin. No warden stirred, no green pulse lit the dark. Beside him, Mina lay still, her breath shallow, cerulean skin pale under starlight. Jonah rolled to her, shaking her shoulder gently. Mina, stay with me. Her eyes flickered open, golden slits faint but fierce. Still here, she whispered, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Jonah let out a ragged laugh, relief flooding through the bond. So am I. But the victory felt hollow. The desert trembled around them, dunes shifting like restless waves. Helion wasn't dead. It was angry, its will a low growl in the earth. Mina pushed herself up, leaning on Jonah, her blade still clutched tight. The trial isn't done, she said, voice steady despite her wounds. We broke a mask, not the cycle. The horizon flared with new light, green and malevolent. Towers of sand rose like titans, their forms coalescing into colossal figures. Wardens magnified, their arms ending in blades and hammers of glass and grit. Their eyes blazed green, voices rumbling like thunder across the expanse. Trial 2 escalates. Choice persists. Break or bend. Jonah tightened his grip on the spear, jaw hard, body aching but unbowed. The bond pulsed strongly, a shared fire that refused to dim. Mina steadied her blade, her golden eyes burning with defiance. "They're not real," Jonah said, scanning their towering forms. "Real enough to kill," Mina replied, her voice calm steel. The first Titan struck, its hammer arm crashing down like a falling mountain. Jonah shoved Mina aside, rolling as the impact threw sand skyward, the shock wave cracking the basin's floor. He came up low, spear flashing, aiming for the Titan's ankle. The blade bit deep, shattering the limb into dust. The giant toppled, collapsing into a dune that dissolved back into the expanse. Mina leapt at the second, her blades carving glowing scars across its torso. The bond flared, Jonah feeling her strength, her strain, as he thrust his spear into the Titan's chest. It exploded into shards, raining down like glass. But more rose, 5, 10, an army of colossi, their footsteps shaking the earth. Jonah's jaw tightened. "We can't cut them all." Mina's hand caught his wrist, her eyes bright with fire. "Then we cut the desert itself." She dropped to one knee, pressing her palm to the sand. The bond surged violently, silver veins racing outward beneath their feet, spreading like cracks in reality. The Titans froze mid-step, their forms trembling as the ground rebelled. Jonah felt the pull in his bones, Helion resisting, its will a suffocating weight. He jammed his spear into the sand beside her hand, pouring his defiance into it, not just rage, but every moment he'd risen from ruin, every refusal to bow. The desert shuddered, Titans crumbling, dunes collapsing in waves. The expanse screamed, a wind rising to blot out the stars. Voices clawed through the gale. Millions, memories twisted, demanding surrender. Jonah's ears rang, blood dripping from his nose. Mina sagged, her eyes dimming, but he wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "Stay with me," he said, voice raw. Her whisper was faint but fierce. "You're not alone. Don't let it take you." Jonah closed his eyes, anchoring to the bond. Her heart beat in his chest, her fire in his veins. He shoved one last surge of will into the spear. The storm broke, sand falling silent, the expanse lying flat and quiet for the first time. No Titans, no wardens, just the desert, hushed and watching. On the horizon, blue light shimmered, Azura hold calling them back. Jonah and Mina staggered toward it, step by agonizing step, leaning on each other, the bond their only compass in the endless sand. The blue light of Azura hold shimmered on the horizon, a beacon cutting through the desert's oppressive silence. Jonah and Mina staggered across the dunes, their steps heavy, each one a battle against the weight of their shared wounds. The bond pulsed steadily, knitting their pain and resolve into a single thread, her fatigue in his muscles, his thirst in her throat. The drums of the hold rolled closer, unyielding, a rhythm that felt like a promise of sanctuary or a warning of judgment. Jonah's spear strapped to his forearm was a grounding weight, its prism glowing faintly silver. Mina's twin blades hung low, her cerulean skin pale under the starlight, but her golden eyes burned with defiance. The dunes fought them, slopes crumbling underfoot, forcing double effort. The sun had long set, but the sand retained its heat, searing through the makeshift plates in Jonah's boots. He moved in bursts, 40 steps, pause, 40 more, old soldier drills preserving what strength remained. Mina matched his pace, her breath sharp but controlled, the bond amplifying their shared endurance. Overhead, shadows flickered, not birds, but constructs of black bone and glowing membranes, their glass eyes rotating without lids. "Echo Scouts," Mina said, voice tight. "They rewrite us for Helion." Jonah's grip tightened on the spear. Not today. He tracked their spiral, two wide, one high, one diving straight, a classic encirclement. He spat grit, eyes narrowing. They mark us, we mark them back. The first scout dove, wings shrieking like tearing metal. Jonah crouched, spear angled upward, waiting for the angle to align. As it closed, he thrust the triple-bladed head, piercing its frame. The construct bucked, membranes shredding into ribbons of light, crashing into the sand with a hiss. The bond jolted, Mina gasping as she clutched his arm, steadying herself. She pointed to the others, weaving a grid of green light above. They're building a net. Jonah pulled her low, the net searing across the dune's crest, turning sand to glass. Break the herd, he muttered, breaking left at an oblique angle. Mina followed, using his momentum as a shield. The construct shifted to block, but Jonah hurled a prism from his satchel, its light sparking as it spun. One scout dove to intercept, and Jonah seized the moment, thrusting his spear through its chest node. The orb shattered, spilling green fire. Mina leapt through the gap, catching the third scout's frame, her nails ripping its membrane. It screamed, twisting, and Jonah finished it with a stomp that cracked its orb. The last scout climbed high, out of reach. Jonah tore the cracked warden mask from his belt, its prism still alive, and hurled it skyward. The construct veered, drawn to the signal. Jonah leapt, spear driving through both mask and creature, the collision searing his arms. He held until the light bled out, shards and ash drifting in the silence. Mina steadied him, her lips curving faintly. You fight like you never stop drilling? Drill keeps bones alive, Jonah said, catching his breath. The bond hummed, her approval a brief warmth against the desert's chill. The drums grew louder as the night deepened, the blue stone walls of Azura Hold rising like a fortress against the stars. The gates remained sealed, their surfaces scarred with resin-patched cracks and blackened burns. Jonah touched the stone, feeling its faint pulse, alive with resonance. Mina pressed her palm to a groove, her skin glowing where it met the surface. The slit parted again, narrower this time, as if the hold itself hesitated. Inside, the citadel was unchanged. Stalagmite towers, silver-threaded bridges, glowing pools casting eerie light. The Azura approached, their silver-cloaked figures silent, eyes gleaming like lanterns. The archivist stood at their head, robes heavy with dust, silver marks curling across their face. Their gaze widened at the sight of Jonah and Mina, the bond's silver light shimmering across their joined hands. You survived the core, the archivist said, voice low, almost reverent. You shattered what Helion built. Jonah dropped to one knee, supporting Mina, whose breath was shallow but steady. Malrek's gone, he said, voice rough. The desert fought back. It's not done. The archivist's eyes pierced him, unyielding. Malrek was not other. He was you, what Helion wanted you to become. The mask is broken, the cycle cracked, but a crack is not destruction. Mina lifted her head, golden eyes fierce despite her pallor. Then we bear it, both of us. The archivist inclined their head, silver marks glowing faintly. So it shall be. You are no longer a pawn nor a prisoner. You are bearers. The desert will write against you, but you will write back. Jonah stood, exhaustion heavy but resolve unbroken. He met Mina's gaze, her faint smile fierce and unyielding. The bond pulsed, a shared fire that refused to dim. The archivist gestured to a side passage. Rest, heal. The desert waits, but you need strength to face it. They followed, the corridor winding deeper, lit by blue fire lamps that flickered without smoke. Jonah mapped the turns, instinct keeping him alert, choke points, exits, and shadows. The passage opened to a small chamber, its walls etched with silver spirals, a single pool glowing at its center. The air was cool, scented with salt and something herbal, soothing the burn in Jonah's lungs. Mina sank beside the pool, her blades clattering softly. Jonah knelt, checking her wounds. The bond silver light had closed them further, but blood still seeped beneath the makeshift bandages. He tore fresh strips from his shirt, packing them gently. "You're tougher than the sand," he said, voice low. Her lips twitched, gold eyes glinting. "And you're too stubborn to die." The bond carried her amusement, a fleeting warmth that eased the ache in his side. He dipped a cloth in the pool, its water cool but tingling, and cleaned her wounds. The silver light flared where it touched, knitting flesh faster. Jonah felt the echo of her relief, a cool wave against his own pain. The archivist appeared at the chamber's edge, holding a satchel of supplies, rations, a new prism for Jonah's spear, and a map etched on a larger crystal shard. The core was one heart, they said. Others beat deeper in the expanse. Helion will summon worse than wardens to test you. Jonah took the satchel, checking the prism's fit in his spear. "Let it try," he said, voice steady. "We've broken one. We'll break more." Mina stood, blades in hand, her posture iron despite the strain. "Trial 2 isn't over," she said, echoing the archivist's weight. "It's only beginning." The archivist nodded, their gaze lingering on the bond's silver glow. "Hold to each other. The desert remembers, but you rewrite." Jonah and Mina stepped back into the corridor, the drums of Azura hold fading behind them. The night air greeted them outside, sharp with the scent of sand and metal. The horizon was quiet, but Jonah felt the desert watching, its silence a coiled threat. He checked the spear's tie, the prism glowing faintly. Mina's blades caught the starlight, her eyes scanning the dunes. "We move at dawn," Jonah said, his voice a low rasp. "Whatever's next, we face it together." Mina's hand brushed his, the bond humming with shared resolve. "Together," she echoed, her voice a promise carved in steel. The desert stretched before them, endless and alive, its whispers waiting to test their next step. The desert's silence was a predator's pause, coiled with threat. Jonah and Mina stood at Azura Hold's edge, the bond a silver pulse weaving their pain and resolve. Jonah's spear, prism glowing faintly, rested on his shoulder. Mina's twin blades gleamed, her cerulean skin pale, but her golden eyes fierce. The hold's drums faded, but their echo lingered, a call to sanctuary or judgment. The crystal map pointed through the whisper dunes to a deeper core. Jonah scanned the horizon, dunes sharp with menace, the air humming with Helion's will. "It's watching," he rasped. Mina's blades shifted. "It's rewriting. Move, or it traps us." They advanced horse sand fighting each step. Jonah moved in bursts, 30 steps. Pause, soldier drills, saving strength. Mina matched him, the bond carrying her fire to him. Whispers crept in, old squad voices, a child's laugh cut short. Jonah froze, seeing gray uniforms. Mina's grip on his arm, sharp through the bond, pulled him back. "Helion's script, don't look." He nodded, her pulse grounding him. They crested a ridge, revealing a basin with a towering black spire, green veins pulsing. Wardens patrolled, masks glowing, echo scouts circling above. Jonah dropped low, Mina beside him. "Another core," he said. "Angrier." "We surprise it," Mina replied, eyes blazing. They slid down, hugging shadows. Jonah spotted green threads tethering wardens to the spire. "Cut the strings," he whispered. They struck, Jonah's spear severing threads, Mina's blades felling wardens into dust. The spire's pulse quickened, sand rising into titans, colossal, glass-armed, eyes green. "Break or bend," they rumbled. Jonah planted his spear. "We don't bend." A titan's blade arm carved a trench. Jonah dove, shielding Mina, thrusting into its leg. It crumbled. Mina's blades slashed another, the bond flaring with shared strain. More titans rose, endless. "We can't fight them all," Jonah growled. Mina knelt, palms on sand, silver light surging through the bond, cracking the basin. Jonah drove his spear beside her, pouring defiance, every refusal to break, into it. The desert screamed, titans collapsing, storms blotting stars. Voices demanded surrender, blood dripping from Jonah's nose. Mina sagged, but he held her close. "Stay with me." "Not alone," she whispered, fierce. Jonah pushed one last surge into the spear. The storm broke, the spire crumbling, the basin still. Azura Hold's blue light glowed near. They staggered to it, the bond their compass. At the gates, the archivist met them, eyes wide at their silver glow. You broke another core, they said, awed. The cycle phrase. Jonah supported Mina. It's not done. You are bearers, the archivist said. The desert fights, but you rewrite. Mina's eyes burned. Trial 2, only beginning. Jonah faced the horizon unbowed. Let it come. I'll rise, not alone. The wind carried his words, the bond of fire against the sand.